Hi everyone, happy to be here. My name is Ariel Davidson, a senior consultant from the Tel Aviv office of McKinsey. I'm actually very happy because Knut Alik, a partner from our Stuttgart office and one of our global supply chain experts, was able to join us today. And before we go into the topic of our discussion today, we actually thought of bringing you our perspective of the current coronavirus. So I'll pass to Knut, who will introduce himself and provide the perspective.
Yes, thank you, Ariel. So indeed, I'm a partner from our Stuttgart office, leading our European supply chain practice. So that's all the folks that do supply chain. Spent my life in supply chain the last 25 years, and now 16 years in McKinsey. Different industries, different topics, but everything in supply chain, right? And we thought that it's interesting to just give a 2 minutes quick update on the COVID-19. So if you, yeah. It's a bit of a text-heavy slide. The next slides will be much more colorful and much more pictures. But what is happening? So we have a lot of cases. Still, majority of the cases, 80,000 is in China, but now kind of spilling over, right? So we have a lot of cases in South Korea, in Italy, and also in Iran, and kind of small number of cases, basically in a lot of different countries. So what happens, as you all saw from the press, in China, the manufacturing sites are closed, right? So people are not allowed to work, and it's now slowly revamping. There's a quarantine period where people need to kind of stay 2 weeks outside the plant, and then they can come back. A lot of workers don't come back at all, so capacity is now still very, very low, and this clearly affects our global supply chains. Right? Why don't we see a lot of shortages now? If you think about the connectivity of supply chains, we have a typical container vessel from Asia to Europe takes 3-4 weeks with custom clearance and so on, can be 5-6 weeks. So what we expect is that it will hit by now or mid-March, where we see that producing companies will then start to see shortages. Question is, what can we do? Or maybe before we do that, it's interesting that there is demand for some products are going down, right? Luxury products going down because Chinese tourists are not traveling anymore. Local demand for automotive in February went down by 80 to 90%, so basically no one is buying cars anymore. So that clearly hits the economy. But there's other products which is going up, right? So e-commerce around the globe is seeing an increase, a significant increase. In Italy, we see a 5-fold increase of online purchases. So that is kind of the positive side, so to say. So what can we do as companies? We need to understand what is our exposure, right, in terms of demand, right? Because now everyone tries to secure a supply, but is this maybe playing a game or not? So understand the real demand. We need to understand the inventory that is still in the chain. We need to understand where we are affected, right? Is it like our side? Is it first tier? Or is second tier, third tier, fourth tier? And this is where companies always struggle with. They know their first tier, but they don't know their second tier and third tier. So understand when will the capacity shortage hit us, and then make sure that if we are in a shortage situation, that we then have stuff in place to prioritize and to make sure that we deliver to our most important customers. Which sounds like it's a normal SNOP control tower, our normal daily planning, but it's kind of a much higher frequency, and as we don't have the full transparency, this is a challenge. What will the future bring? We expect that it will continue for a couple of weeks and months, but just to give you an idea of other diseases, so to say. In China, we have normally 1.5 million cases, influenza cases per year. So it is still much smaller than influenza, right? But the problem is that people just don't know, right? Because of this uncertainty, there is a little bit of a slight panic currently. So that is what we wanted to do. Very quick. Now hand over to Ariel.
So what we wanted to share with you today is our experience working with global companies on basically Industry 4. what are the big global players are doing on this topic. And I think before we start, a sentence that pretty much captures the current situation on digital or Industry 4 in our case, by Dan Ariely. So everyone is talking about it. I think everybody is trying to do something about it. Everyone tells he's doing something about it, but are they really? And that's what we want to share with you today. What are the players that we work with? What are they doing about digital or about the Industry 4? Basically, when we look at the solution space, we segment it into 4 types of solutions, right? The first are to do with data. Basically, a lot of solutions to generate and capture much more data, much more granular data, data that is coming from devices that previously we were not able to talk with. So that's one area. The other area is the way we use the data, right? So applying analytics and intelligence. So a lot of solutions we see out there, more and more solutions that are taking this data and really creating insightful learnings from the data. If in the past, they brought in consultants with a hypothesis and did the analysis in Excel, today we see that what is being done is the data is being taken and analyzed by a data scientist and generates an insight which previously was not being able to derive it. The third element is the human-machine interaction. So this has been here for, I think, at least 10 years. But what we see is that the machines are becoming more and more sophisticated, and the robots or the cobots are becoming much more, let's say, human-friendly. And we see the lines that in the past were, if you had to put a robot on the line, you had to fence it, and you had to make sure that no human was getting near to the line. Today we see interactions. So we see lines, production lines, that are jointly serviced by humans and robots. And the last one is the advanced production methods, basically the renewable energy, new types of energy, 3D printing. A lot of new production methods are entering into this space. So we acknowledge that this is a priority for everyone, and actually, based on a survey we did, 68% of senior leaders acknowledge that Industry 4 is a priority for them. Actually, based on my own experience, I would say the number is closer to 80 or 90. Basically, everyone is talking about this and is acknowledging that they are doing it or they want to enter this. Yet, again, based on the research we've done, we see that most players are currently in what we call the piloting phase. So they're doing a lot of pilots. They're taking solutions that are digital solutions or Industry 4 solutions and are implementing them in their own sites or in their own supply chains, but are not really scaling up. Right? So most of the players nowadays are somewhat stuck in the piloting phase. And what we want to show you today is what are the players that were able to go beyond the pilot phase and really scale up to completely digitize their value chain. What have they done?
What I often hear is my clients saying that I have more pilots than Lufthansa. So there is a lot of pilots running around, right? But the question is, what do we do with these pilots, right? How do we scale them? If we look into the innovations we have, and you don't need to read through all of this, what we did, we wanted to understand, is there something that is already scaled? Is there something that is newly developed or in pilot phase? And as we can see from that graph, there is basically the majority of the innovations out there, and this is in planning, this is in physical flow, this is in order management, so all topics that are related to supply chain. Most of the topics are in pilot phase, right? Some are now starting to scale. What we did over the last 2 years, we did 2 surveys where we wanted to identify lighthouses. And it's quite interesting if you look into the results of this. So what we basically did is that 2 years ago we surveyed manufacturing lighthouses, and then last year again manufacturing, but expanded it to end-to-end supply chain. And what we see is that the companies, and you see it here, the front runners, they are doing much better, right? So here's the impact on cash flow. So basically they're doing much better. And how do they do that? It's basically they have a clear strategy on piloting, but then they scale, right? So they're not in this early phase where we have 50 pilots running around and no one knows exactly how to do what with the pilots. No, they take the pilots and scale. So that basically means that there is an upfront investment required. So in the first place, it looks a little bit like, are we really kind of improving? But then it pays back, right? It pays back big times. And if we then look into how these pilots, how these lighthouse sites are distributed around the world, it's quite interesting to see that, first of all, they're everywhere, right? So there's no region where you would say, hey, this is a region where we have extremely good manufacturing sites. No, they're everywhere. You see a lot of big names on there, but you see also a lot of small names, right? So there's a lot of small, medium-sized companies that are extremely good in their manufacturing. If we now, we did not yet have the graph for the newly released one. If we look into the additional end-to-end lighthouses, you will see a similar picture, right? So you will see also that this is kind of spread around the world. You will see that there is big companies in there, and there are small companies in there, and they're expanding into the end-to-end value chain. And this is also what we see, what is kind of the winning theme. That we have in the past, we had like manufacturing is, let's say, one part, one silo. Supply chain and logistics, planning and logistics was another part, another silo. And then clearly you have also commercial and other topics. But now kind of bringing these two together is as one of the winning theme going forward. To understand trade-offs, in planning and manufacturing, in logistics and manufacturing, and with this optimize the overall system. Understand the interfaces work together and not getting stuck in local incentives. We put it as you can see on the right. It's basically a customer-back supply chain, right? Where we need to integrate end-to-end. We want to be connected and we want to be intelligent, and this is where the whole digital and Industry 4.0 topics can help big times. Now, what is the vision? The vision is kind of to bring all of this together and to, what we show here is basically kind of a digital twin, that you have everything integrated. You have it integrated in your planning system, execution. You have the data to improve your planning, and you work in a kind of a seamless integrated value chain. Here now shown as an example for an automotive client.
Basically, how are the big or the global companies that are that took the Industry 4.0 seriously go beyond the piloting phase? On this slide, we try to synthesize the 6 key elements that we see constantly, both with our clients and other players that have done this transition. Basically, the 4.1 is to tie the Industry 4 to their strategy. A lot of cases that we see, people are implementing solutions that are not really tied to the company strategy and do not really have a business case. It's a cool solution, it's digital, it's very nice to talk about it, but really if you think what is the value of implementing it, it's hard to quantify it. So really tying it to the strategy and quantifying the value or defining the business case is a must. The other element is doing it at scale. So it's not doing 1, 2 use cases by a small team in the company. It's really identifying. Only last week I've come back from a company where they identified 60 use cases, right? And currently they are implementing 10 to 15 use cases at once. Right? The third element is the way they are working, right? It's coming from the high-tech industry, but they are setting agile teams. It's not anymore that the R&D or the operational excellence or a specific team in the company who's doing this implementation. They're setting up multifunctional teams that are working in an agile way. Actually, every 2 weeks are implementing some changes to the solution and deploying it and testing it and working really fast to implement those 10 to 15 cases at once. Actually, you cannot do it, you cannot do 10 to 15 cases if you don't work in an agile way. The fourth element is capability building, and this relates a bit to the overall theme of what we're saying. It's really a cultural transformation. So the companies who are doing it, they are not, again, giving the responsibility to a small team within the company to go digital or to implement the Industry 4. They are really developing capabilities for the entire people on Industry 4.0 knowledge, right? From design thinking through data collecting, data architecture, data scientists, really building capabilities across the existing workforce to create to transform the culture. The fifth element, which also relates to a cultural transformation, is the engagement of the workforce. Again, it's not something that is done by a small niche amount of people in the company. It's really everyone is identifying solutions and implementing them. It's kind of, for the people here who have done operational excellence transformation 10 or 15 years ago, one of the key levers in an operational excellence transformation is really to involve the shop floor and really to get ideas from the shop floor. And that's what's happening with these players today. They get the ideas from the people from people around the company, are building their capabilities and letting them implement that. And the last thing, which is actually very important, and you cannot start a transformation without it, is making sure that the IT is not a bottleneck. In a lot of cases, we see players not implementing solutions because they are in the middle of installing a new ERP system, right? And today, there are the companies who are not waiting and are advancing on Industry 4.0, they've put solution in place, basically a data lake that allows many startups and many solution providers and many applications to connect to their data and debottleneck the IT infrastructure.
It's the fourth industrial revolution. Sorry for the abbreviations. It's full of abbreviations. So quickly on a case we did. There was a client who we helped to embark on an integrated journey in improving the customer value, and with this basically backing up also by the supply chain, by the integrated planning. What is interesting with this case is that it's a combination of digital, let's say, ideas to be applied, right? To plan better, to plan faster, to use all information, to do margin optimization, to do a kind of a margin by the hour optimization. But then also how we developed it. In agile sprints, we did set up a studio, and with this completely changed the way of working. So here, basically, we run a bit out of time. This is kind of the overall architecture. So what we did in terms of planning. Maybe we jump to the next one. And that was interesting that here we did really set up a physical studio, right? A lot of let's say waterfall-driven projects you have where people work not together, where you have your specs and then you try to meet your specs. What we did here is we combined all people in a big room, and the walls were kind of full of post-its. We had brainstorming sessions. We did have UX designers. We did have supply chain people. We did have advanced analytics people. In this studio, it was a group of 30 to 40 people working on the solution, and not working on PowerPoint, but working on the solution itself, right? So it's very easy to kill a PowerPoint slide. It's impossible to kill a prototype, right? And this is basically what we did here. This is kind of an impression of the Friday report out, right? So as you see, there's a crowd of people kind of interested in what is going on. It's very interesting in how this developed over the time. In the beginning, people were a little bit like skeptical. Oh, there's this new thing. What is that? Right? It was 3 years ago when we did this project, this agile sprints. But then after week and week and week, we had more and more people joining this report out. At the end, it was sometimes 80 to 100 people were interested in learning what's going on. Right? Very interesting. The methodology was then also applied in other areas. Impact, significant. So as you can see here from the numbers, we did help them to increase their profit significantly. For supply chain people, it's always kind of this combination of what is it that we can improve in service level, right? And here, service level translated into an increase in margin because we could better allocate our scarce capacity. We could at the same time, in the value chain itself, reduce working capital, improve our planning accuracy, and then also in terms of execution, so we were much better in executing what we planned for. So a seamless integration of the order management process, the customer interface, to all the planning processes from kind of S&OP to the order management, to the production planning, and to supplier integration. With this, improving the customer experience, but then also instilling this new idea of agile working, and afterwards then rolling this out to apply it on a global scale.
So most of the insights that we shared here today are captured in actually in a big research and an article we did with the World Economic Forum. So if anyone is interested in more details and to understand, to go deeper on this topic, please reach out, and I'm happy to share the article.
And we are still around, so if there's questions, happy to discuss afterwards individually. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.